Welcome, children of Iluvatar, to Echoes of Tolkien. I'm Ryan.
I'm Derek.
I'm Colton.
And I'm Logan.
All right, we just got done watching War of the Rohirrim, so it's kind of our fresh take right after we finished watching. Start off over with Derek.
I was not a fan of the film. I really tried to go into it with an open mind. I'm not an anime fan, so I really tried to go into it with an open mind. But for me, the anime really took away from like a Tolkien story, especially like in the fight scenes. That killed it for me. You know, people jumping over each other and jumping in the air and holding that striking pose for a while. And then as awesome as Helm is of a character, just nonstop fighting with people with just his fists.
A little over the top.
A troll and, you know, people coming up the causeway. It just took me away from, you know, which was kind of a good story. It just wasn't jiving.
I thought it was a good story. So I'm also someone who's not like a big fan of anime, but it bothered me less than I thought. I actually was like, it's okay. Do I think that live action's still better? Yes. I think Helm Hammerhand is a really cool character, actually, that it'd be cool to see it like in a live action remake in a way. I thought the story was, I don't want to say lazy. The story seemed kind of lazy. What I mean by that is they did so much like throwback or copycat of the Lord of the Rings movies.
It's fan service.
It was very much.
Yeah. It is a lot of fan service, but it's almost like eye roll because it's really just like repeating it.
And completely unnecessary at a lot of points.
Yeah, like the main character was, for me, I'm like, it's Eowyn, everyone. Like, it just is. And a lot of just, I'd say, like, lazy references that kind of kept going back and retelling same parts of the story.
Dude taking down the Oliphant, and you know, even his pose after he came down was like exactly like Legolas.
Yeah,
Return of the King.
Yeah. There will be spoilers in this, by the way, just so everyone knows who's watching.
Well, it is a movie recap.
Yeah, it's a movie recap, but I just want to make sure everyone knows, like, spoiler. If you don't want to know anything movie, like, stop now. Overall, though, like, I am happy to see more content goes out, good or bad. It was, for me, better than I thought. Like, I wasn't completely bored the whole time. Even though it was anime, it didn't bother me as much. So
I absolutely hated it. I'll just come out and say it. That was. There's a few times, you know, I was hoping for something to like really like, okay, well, like that was like kind of cool, but like, the whole time I was just pissed the whole time. I thought it was pretty terrible. I'm also not a fan of anime, so like that didn't help. And then, I mean, they somewhat followed kind of like the story of it all, but like everything had like a major twist that was different from the actual story, and I tried going into it like knowing that they went in, you know, added the character of Hera, and you know, kind of like made her this whatever. Like I knew, so I was trying to keep it like out of my mind of like being a direct correlation to like Tolkien's work, but because they did stay pretty decent on this like general storyline, it was hard to look at it as a separate piece, and it just infuriated me the whole way through.
And I think even from movie opportunity, because you said it when we were watching, was the Olwen character should have died.
Yeah,
That's I was like.
So she was just like what, a princess maiden?
Well, so she was just like her handmaid essentially, but they were referencing that she was one of the original Shield Maiden.
Yeah, she was one of the Shield Maidens still alive. She's like, there is still one, and then that's it. But there were like so many opportunities where like it actually would have been more captivating if she would have died. But when like all the characters that aren't supposed to die,
I thought she was going to die when they were freeing Hera from.
Yeah, that's when it should have happened. Like,
yeah, that would have meant more.
Yeah. What were your take, Logan?
Well, as a mild fan of anime, I didn't mind the style at all, and I actually think it was pretty well done. The story itself just didn't grasp me. Like I found it to be, for what was out released in theaters, supposed to be like a blockbuster film. Like I felt like it was unnecessary. I know you had mentioned probably be better as like a series, as like a TV show, and I agree. I think producing this as a theater released film was probably a a mistake because, and I think the numbers have shown from that too, is that people just weren't interested in going out and seeing this movie out in the theaters.
It's just weird to have a one-off about some created character
Right.
that you're thrust into at the beginning. She's just riding a horse, and they're like, "Ah, she's wild and free."
Right.
Yeah.
And then you're supposed to have a connection to her.
It's too much too soon. That's why when watching it, I was like, this would make a good show.
Yeah.
Where you
I
have
think it would too.
you
Where they
have-
could flush the characters out.
Yeah,
a little
flush
bit.
And not
characters
only
out.
that, but like anime has a huge fan base right now. So even people that wouldn't be into Lord of the Rings could probably get into this in like that kind of format. But again, as a theater released movie, I understand why people weren't going out in droves to go watch this movie.
Yeah.
And then even as I think people that were watching it, like it's an okay movie, but like as far as like Lord of the Rings content, it was just kind of mid for people.
I guess want to clarify. I didn't not like it because it was anime. And like the artwork was good. I thought I thought the artwork was pretty
Oh,
good.
the design was great.
I just like whenever it was like one-on-one combat, I just felt like that's where like it was just,
Too stylized.
anime stylized fighting. I'm like, that just doesn't feel like
It takes away from the realism. I get it.
right. And I know shouldn't be comparing all these things to Peter Jackson's trilogy, but naturally that is kind of what I do.
Right.
And
It's a different medium, and like I said, I think, and really honestly, like the box office, like we mentioned, it shows it. I mean, it shows that this probably wasn't the best way to release the content. But like you kind of said, like if this was a show and people could actually get captivated, it would probably bring people into the Lord of the Rings realm.
Oh yeah.
But it's still good seeing the content, like I said. But it'd probably bring people, the anime fans, into like a new storyline, and that would actually branch into more Lord of the Rings fandom.
Yeah, and again, like as a mild fan of anime, I'm actually kind of hoping when like this is out for rental right now. I hope when it goes streaming, that maybe more people get into it, and maybe they like produce more Lord of the Rings anime content, but in a different kind of format.
Yeah, I don't think the anime movie stuff. I think in general, anime movies are harder than just like anime shows because, like I said, I think something with like this does need that character flushing and things like that because it's not a story people are already familiar with. Like Lord of the Rings, it's easy because it was already such a big. I think it was voted book of the century back in the 1900s. So everyone already knew the story. So you're like, you kind of have an idea when you're going to see it in theaters in a movie format. Something like this, where it's a completely new story, you need that development and a longer context, not a longer movie, like a show development where something's like you almost need it in doses.
Right.
Like even watching this movie, I was like, I could.
When's
do
this over?
You're like, when's this over? Because
Yeah.
like it drags out, and maybe it's just format. But I'm like a show where you get those like 30-minute intervals, and you're clocked out. You can think about it and kind of move on.
Yeah, and I know there's differing opinions here. I actually think anime is the perfect medium for smaller scale Lord of the Rings stories. I know we've talked before about how Star Wars has their computer generated TV show, The Clone Wars, and that was a great medium for that content. I actually think anime is like the perfect one to go about for smaller Lord of the Rings stories.
For these like side.
Yeah, these side
stories,
things.
yeah.
Nothing huge. Like I mean, like again,
Yeah.
like I feel like this was probably the wrong approach for release for a story like this. I do think that a smaller scale show would have worked out better. But like I think as far as the anime medium, I think it's perfect for Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that they didn't go straight. I'm surprised they tried a theatrical release for this.
All right.
I think the budget was $30 million for this movie, but I'm just surprised that they went for a theatrical release. And don't get me wrong, I think they're like probably gonna make like, I could be off here, like $15 to $20 million that like they made in theaters, and the streaming service is probably they're gonna make their money back.
Oh, of course.
But it's
what
definitely
was the budget for the film?
30 million.
So they're in the hole.
For now, but like
Yeah, but typically like
Their marketing expenses aren't
even
included in that,
let's
though.
let's say they made at the end of the day they made $10 million on it. That's considered like a flop still.
Oh no, it's gonna be a flop because, mind you, that $30 million budget is to make the film. You have the marketing budgets, you have all the other fees associated with film producing and making. So like, no matter what, they'll probably like you get your break even, and sometimes that is what it is.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's no mistaking that it was a flop. They released it for rental 2 weeks after it was released
Yeah.
in theaters.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to go on record. This isn't a completely new story. I mean, it's part of the books. It's just, I mean, there's probably a lot of people who haven't like finished the books and like, okay, I'm not going to read the appendixes and just kind of close it and move on. I mean, it's
Yeah.
obviously, they added Hera more. I mean,
Not even named in the appendices.
yeah, I mean, Helm had a daughter, but that's all it tells you.
Right.
For them to take her and make her a whole character is the new aspect. But like, the whole grudge there with Wolf and whatnot. I mean, that is part of Tolkien's like writings. I mean, it's been out there. But I mean, I just don't see even with this. Once it goes streaming, I don't see how this isn't going to bring in other fans to like the Lord of the Rings. I don't think.
I think I agree with you on that. If this is like their first Lord of the Rings content, I can't see them really watching this and going, "Oh, I really want to go and watch the films."
Well, even if they watch, oh, that's cool, and you go to watch the films or read the book, and it's nothing
like it.
Like remote, it's like, oh, well, this is.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have those casual people strolling in watching this and be like, "Oh, well, like now I'm kind of like I'm into this. Maybe I'll check out the other Lord of the Rings content that's out there." But yeah, they're gonna have there's gonna be a major difference in the style of everything. Even the way the story's written, I feel like it was just. It didn't.
None of the characters are continuous with like the films because it's different time period.
Different time period.
So if you watch
Saruman's in it.
Saruman is in it
for what 10 seconds. So you watch this animated film, and you're like, oh, I'm interested. You go watch the regular films, and like nobody in there is named. So you're like, okay, there's no carryover. Rohan's like this main centerpiece of this movie, obviously. That's not really true in the films. I mean, obviously Rohan plays a huge role in Two Towers and Return of the King, but it's not like they're this main thing. And I don't know. I don't see where we're going to draw new audiences from it by large.
I will say this, though, a good thing. When it does start off and you hear the music, you are instantly
you get that like well in a little bit.
I would say, why don't we move on to like the good?
Yeah.
So obviously, like you just said, the music was good because they basically kept most of the original score. They did have a couple other of their own tunes in there, but it still flowed. Yeah, when the Lord of the Rings cover art comes on and you have the music, it's like, that's familiar to me, makes your heart warm up. And that's kind of, they leaned a lot on that. Well, I'll get to that later. But they lean a lot on that stuff, trying to connect to the films.
Get that nostalgia going.
I'd rather them connect with that music realm rather than them literally just like copying scenes or borderline exact quotes from the Lord of the Rings movies, where it's like, okay, we know what you're doing. Like I'd rather the music be that connection that keeps us rather than them essentially just remaking some of the same stories.
Yeah, agreed.
I thought the art and the animation was pretty good. Some of the scenes look pretty sick with like the Oliphant breaking down the walls of Edoras and the timbers flying and the city burning. And I thought some of the gore was kind of cool with like the arrow through the neck of Haleth, and I thought some of that stuff was pretty. That actually was
like
cool.
Surprising to me for some reason. Like I knew he was gonna die in that moment, but when I saw the arrow go through the neck, I was like, oh, that was one way to do it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. It'd be kind of cooler, though, if blood started, like, squirting out or something like that in a little bit.
They should have just taken that extra step.
Yeah.
Oh, I did like at the beginning, they had the map, and the camera kind of comes down through the map a little bit. I mean, that's kind of like a familiar feeling, but it looked good. And
yeah, I liked, I'm very happy, like, good is, the Helm Hammerhand story is actually pretty interesting, and it's pretty cool. I know some of this was, like, free-range graces with the story.
Right.
But in the beginning, like he seemed like a true king, like a true be honest with you, like Theoden is a shit king in my opinion, like of Rohan. So like seeing like a real king of Rohan, I'm like, this is what a king should be. Someone who's actually like willing to do what it takes for his people and protect his people, and isn't a crybaby.
Which I mean, you're right. He was a little whiny, a little weak.
Yeah, but Helm Hammerhand, I'm like that.
He's a badass.
Yeah, I'm like that's what Rohan's all about. So, really was happy to do that. When you'll know better than me, the guy's name that he punches and
Freka.
Thank you. Yeah, he dies right in the beginning.
That was kind of a cool moment.
That was cool. Yeah. I was like, because I am not as familiar with the story as you guys are with this one. So when he punched him, I'm like, is he dead? And you're like, didn't you know that? I'm like, nah, but so I was watching as like a fresh face there. I was like, that's pretty cool.
That's how we got the name Hammerhand.
Yeah, apparently.
So obviously, I'm a lot more critical of this, and probably disliked it more than most of you guys.
But what was your
But
good?
the good would be is they kept at least the generalized structure of the story. Where they come in, he asks for Wolf to take on Hera, and there's a no. They go outside, fight. Helm kills them by a punch or whatever. They go back, pick up the Dunlings, come back. I mean, they don't really go over like the time basis, but I mean, just like the generalized, that happens. They come back, they overrun at our ass. Fleet of Helm's Deep, well, Hornburg, and I mean, at least that all that kind of stuff, like it is actually like somewhat true to like what was originally written, and I mean that's pretty much my only good take. I mean, at least if you're gonna take a story to somewhat keep it generically there, I guess.
What about you?
Like for me, I think just the anime style. I think it was like again. I think it was well done for what I think is good to carry on Lord of the Rings stories, and I think stylizing all the animation based off of the Peter Jackson film designs is the solid way to go. And I know they had, they were the producers. They produced this, so it makes sense that they'd use that.
It provides a little continuity.
It does, and I think that's one of the reasons anybody would want to actually go out and watch is like, oh, even though it's a long time before those movies, the styles there, the designs there, and obviously again the music brought me back into is like that's really nice, like getting that nostalgia going, having that connection, and overall, like I mean, like Colton said, like I like that they kept the structure of what the story was, and I'm not one that really minds that much when they have to embellish things a bit.
I mean, Peter Jackson did it. So
Peter Jackson did it, and he made some really great movies. This is definitely something that like. I mean, I think we talked about it before. Like, nobody. This is another thing nobody really asked for, but I hope it's something that maybe can get them to produce more content going forward. Because I would like to see these smaller scale stories, not theatrical films, done in this kind of style.
I have my doubts with just the way this is kind of flopped. That this is going to encourage them to move anything forward with.
It's
shorter
that could
stories.
change with streaming,
and I would kind of also it could, but like
it's actually,
I kind of doubt they're gonna move forward with any more Lord of the Rings anime work
Well,
because it's been pretty critiqued online at least.
So here's actually like something that is worth noting. Nothing right now that they're trying to do with Lord of the Rings is actually working for them. Even Rings of Power is underperforming what they had hoped. This definitely underperformed,
Including season 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's still underperforming. I mean, it's still...
I don't know. I'm asking.
Yeah. So season... Overall, the Rings of Power, like, not to get on a tangent on it because we're talking about Rohirrim, but, like, it kind of goes hand in hand. It is still underperforming on their initial expectations because the goal of Rings of Power was for it to be a phenomenon like Game of Thrones. Like, this was Jeff Bezos's Game of Thrones.
right?
And it's definitely not being as received as something like that. Like, this isn't something that you really casually go out and talk to people about, and if you do, it's not typically like met with the warmest grace. It's all right.
Do you think a lot of that has to do with how hardcore fans are about
I'll say I think there's two main reasons, and one being, your Lord of the Rings fans are pretty critical, love the books, love Tolkien's work, and then the reason Peter Jackson stuff's so appreciated is just because the amount of time and energy went into keeping those details. It's like, I think we've said this numerous times, like Peter Jackson set such a high bar.
He did.
So, Amazon attacking with this huge budget, it's just still not up to the same quality. Things aren't the same. I have other reasons why I think the show is underperforming, but I'm going to keep those to myself.
Now, so me personally, I'm getting pretty close to like, I'm no longer asking for more content. To me, I feel like every time they put out something new, it's worse than what was before. So obviously you have the original trilogy, which I mean is what got at least me, I think most of us,
All of us
into
started, I think.
the Lord of the Rings to begin with. you know, and that it was just so great. And then they come out with the Hobbit, and it's like, oh yeah, and then that was kind of underwhelming. You know,
Kind of a letdown.
you
Yeah.
go back and watch it. Okay, well, you know, we're a little hard on it at first, and whatever. You know, it's okay. It's definitely not the trilogy. And then, you know, Rings of Power comes next, and it's kind of, you know, it's underperforming. I'm not a huge fan of it. And then this comes out, and it just seems like every time they come out with something new, it's just, to me at least, it's just getting worse and worse. You know, when there's so much other like writing out there, I'm to the point where I think I'm calling it quits when it comes to asking for more content.
See, I think the only fear of no more content is then essentially the fandom over time will go away. I mean, because if you don't keep up, what I will say though is it could be truth behind releasing enough bad content that it steers people away too.
That's true.
Because you're like, this is just getting crazy. I don't think the content that's out there has been bad enough that it's going to turn away people. But I do get when you are already a fan, you always feel let down. And I think like going into
Probably.
and I guess that can get us into the bad of the War of Rohirrim. And we can kind of start here about like what are the letdowns? We already mentioned some, but if we focus more on like the bad and the ugly, what were your thoughts on some of that?
I mean, I already discussed my dislike for the one-on-one fight scenes. I thought they were a little crazy. I thought like the whole single wooden siege tower with this 100-foot bridge was stupid and over the top. Easily could have been defended with some fire, like we saw.
Well, they did that so late too. I'm like, first off,
Yeah.
what got me is like you could have shot flaming arrows at it as they're building it. Like for months, they're like sitting there watching it being built. Like that actually really irked me. So I'm glad you brought that up because I'm like, it's literally standing out there and they're just watching me build, and they're like, they're gonna be ready any day now. And I'm like, and you guys have done nothing this whole time.
Remind me.
Yeah.
What was the point of the eagle at the end? What did it do?
It literally all it did was
It swooped in. It didn't even grab Wolf.
No, all the eagle did was take the armor to her cousin, Helm's
That's-
armor, so that he would be at the top of it. That was all he did.
So what was the point of her scaling the cliff to talk to the eagle?
To get him to take the
to
armor.
get to take the armor.
And that was
it.
That was literally the only point.
And this is the eagle that's been flying around the entire movie to make it seem like it doesn't have this grand, awesome, cool thing. Like, for example, if I were her, I'd be like, hey, eagle, can you please knock out this tower that they're literally building 100 feet from from Helm's Deep? And
I mean,
instead,
they ended up shooting flaming arrows at it. They could have done that while they were.
Well,
building
like
it.
Exactly.
you're watching it. It's Wolf and Hera one-on-one, and this eagle swoops right down, and I thought it grabbed him. Because I mean, with the eagle swooping down, that's kind of what I assumed. And then when he's still standing there, I'm like, whoa, okay, well, well, that's a flaw, right? Like, why would you not just?
yeah,
I don't know. So I thought that was wildly dumb.
like the eagle's sole purpose was to take the armor to the cousin so he could pretend to be Helm, essentially, and scare people.
I thought that the Oliphants and their army was a cheap fan service way just to like, remember these from the movie? Now they're in here, you know, I don't know.
Yeah. That, and also I laughed. I think we all laughed. So when the one Oliphant is like tearing its way through the woods and it's ripping out every tree it goes through, and then somehow it sneaks up on her.
The 60-ton Oliphant.
The 60-ton, yeah, Oliphant, and then like sneaks up on her, and then she sees it, and it's literally.
And then they put the Watcher in the water
Yeah.
in in Fangorn Forest Lake. So it's like there was a little fan service there.
And somehow, like, I'm not saying that the scaling was wrong, but when that thing just randomly ate that giant ass
In one
Oliphant in
basically
one
bite.
I was like,
but couldn't eat a single hobbit.
yeah, exactly. It took them quite a while. No, that's like where it got into like a little bit like going, okay, this is just I don't say lazy, and it's maybe because I'm not used to seeing like anime formats and how those storylines go and what captivates an audience. For me though, I was just like,
I know I'm being nitpicky here, but
That's what we're here for.
It drove me nuts that Helm's out there fighting people. Two things. Fighting people with nothing but fists the entire time. Like, use your Warhammer.
Well, that was part of the lore of him.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. But like, I guess in my mind, the reality versus your myth and folklore would be
Well, yeah.
you'd use a weapon. But
Well, that's where
it's
he
a
also
blizzard.
did
It's,
stand on the causeway defending off like attackers. That's not what happened with him. And now I'm gonna get all worked up.
Get worked up.
But let me-
Let's
hold
go.
on,
Yeah.
it's like the harshest winter. It's a blizzard storm, and he's out there in like a sleeveless shirt.
Yeah.
And,
His
like
muscles
that's
look
the
good.
anime touch
He's
where
like-
it's like he's ripped,
Yeah.
so his sleeves are off in the winter, and I'm like, no. That it's stuff like that though that just pulls me away from the story. But
And that is the medium too. Is like anime. Is
right,
always
I know
over
that
the
that's like
top.
the medium
Yeah.
for it, but like
Impractical, gets the message across.
Right.
But-
A watcher in the water eating a giant oliphant, just whole, like over the top.
Let's also add to the fact that Oliphant was sliced from neck down to his balls.
And nothing.
And nothing. and then it was like nothing happened to him. He's like, no, I'm fine.
well, those swords would have a hard time really piercing through the hide.
Well, they showed it cutting through.
I think it was kind of just like scratching it.
Scratch the surface.
Yeah.
But I'll say this: the Hera character
Wood.
would exactly. That's the
she's
thing.
pretty fine.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say she's fine. I liked her. She was nice to watch. Do I think it's practical? So if we're being like actually nitty-gritty, it's interesting to me how she was the hero of the story essentially and well respected. But then if you go in time, like future in time, and women still aren't allowed to fight and things like that. But at this historical war, it's like, oh, that's what saves the day. And then all of a sudden, like, it didn't change the history for him. And then it's like, Eowyn in the future, it's like, you can't fight. So it's just very
It's just weird, like Helm's like, you're what Rohan needs. And then after the war, like, well, let's just give it to your cousin.
Yeah. And I know she wouldn't want it and all that stuff. I'm like, it's still interesting to me how it's like, well, clearly that didn't last for their views on things throughout history.
I do have one gripe about the some of the outfits. I thought that her combat outfit was very out of place.
It looked too futuristic.
It looked
Yeah.
modern, and I'm like,
I thought it looked more like Renaissance.
Yeah, it did.
Style clothing.
yeah, that was the one gripe as far as like outfits and stuff in the movie. I'm like, that doesn't look.
I know this probably isn't the best reference. It almost looked like a Princess Leia outfit.
Maybe a little bit.
It got a little bit. Like,
I was thinking more of like a Padme.
yeah.
Like, so even where like, the men have like the longer like dangling garbs and like she's in like
This
tights.
tight- yeah.
like
Yeah, it seemed out of place. Also, I because I don't want to forget it. Was her horse? Was that like one of the?
Miras.
Yeah,
They definitely, I think they
implied for it,
implied for
I don't
it.
think they ever implied it.
but only Rohirrim
Well,
kings.
I mean, it was faster than all the other horses. It was pure white.
I mean, they were probably doing that just for like
Yeah.
another cheap connection point. However, there are more than just one white horse out there.
Yeah. It did seem to me.
And I don't think it was that
only
her
seen
horse was
her-
the fastest. She was just the fastest rider.
I feel like the horse has a lot to do with that. I mean,
I mean, they're doing the running.
yeah. Well, that's why I'm like, I do. It's like she's fastest rider. I'm like, well, and also the horse is doing the work, so she's got to hold on.
I mean, there's things as far as like handling would go, but not that it's going to make that big of a difference.
Yeah. The love connection thing between Wolf and Hera was I don't say odd. Like they did try doing like a backstory thing quickly there.
I mean, they're like, we were
and like the
inseparable
childhood
as
friends thing is not part of the appendices, is it?
No, because there's nothing.
There was nothing,
on Hera
other than
Helm
he had
had
a
a
daughter.
well, they just like, we were inseparable as kids. And then there's a flashback to them fighting and him scratching her, and because of that, they separate.
She
Her
scratched
scratched him.
Yeah, sorry. And then they separate for, what,
Kind of
20
seems like a
years?
theme for Wolf is like, hey, he's sparring with her, gets mad whenever he gets hurt, and then like later on his dad starts a fight and then ends up losing, and then he's mad at Helm.
It was so. It is actually. He didn't get mad at her. He actually protected her and said, "Get out of here before my dad gets here." When she cut him.
That's fair.
But it is like just a scorned man. I mean, a scorned man is literally what like ran through with this whole thing where he's mad at Hera because like she didn't want to marry him, and then I think the accurate story is the fact that Helm killed his dad. I think that's the accurate story. You'll know better than me. So I'm like,
that's like
okay.
the one thing that is accurate.
Yeah, the vengeance type thing, but they tried really incorporating the Hera thing into the story with him and why he's kind of doing what he's doing, and it would all stop if she would have married him and want to, not just settle. So,
I mean, who wouldn't want to marry that piece of ass?
I thought, obviously throwing Saruman in there at the end was kind of a bit of like fan service, I guess. You want to use that word a lot. I mean, it's not that it's inaccurate. It's just like,
I mean,
he just shows up to be like, hey, if you need something, give me a call. It's like, thanks.
Well, in all fairness, when those wars were happening, like you said, because even this like part, aside from me not really knowing the Helm story, I think though that is kind of the time frame where Saruman does like get into Isengard and start like occupying that area.
I just feel like every trailer I saw for the movie, it was like, hey, Saruman's in this.
That was probably also.
And you see him for like maybe 10 seconds.
It is the only similar character, but also like Christopher Lee's passing. It creates that heart moment. I do think they actually.
It was great. It was either, I think it was AI that did his voice.
No, it was a line from like, I guess like
an unused.
Yeah, an unused
scene.
from I think like The Hobbit or something.
But what's crazy?
It was great to hear his voice.
Yeah,
well, what's crazy though is you could tell that it was inserted because the recording quality was different than the recording quality of the rest of the movie. So it was kind of like it's kind of like when you just insert words when no one's talking type thing. Like how it's out of place. But I'm happy they did it how they did it, where they actually used his voice and line from it. But it sounded different than the rest of the movie. What I did think was kind of stupid, because we talked about timeline at the end of it, is they did a quick, very short, like a brief like reference to like the orcs collecting rings for Mordor and things
unnecessary.
like that. Well, that and then
Gandalf was summoning her to Eisen.
Yeah, exactly. And that
Gandalf's already questioning orcs and about rings and everything.
But I'm like, that wouldn't make any sense then with Lord of the Rings. So I'm like, at that point, like you said, Gandalf isn't even really looking at gold rings to find the one ring, and then I feel like he may have questioned the ring that Bilbo had a little more if he was also
already searching for something. Yeah.
Exactly. So that was a little bit odd.
Because like we know Saruman was searching for the ring, but as far as we know, Gandalf wasn't.
I thought it was leading into be like, oh, I was just summoned to Isengard for Saruman, even though he's like already here.
that would have made more sense.
And then I made a joke while we're watching. Oh, it's gonna be Gandalf. Like,
and then it was.
And then it ended up being Gandalf, and then I was kind of pissed.
Yeah. That's what was funny is we'd actually make joke reference throughout, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's
what they did.
That's what they're doing.
It just made no sense. Like, oh, he once questioned about orcs gathering rings. It's like she saw them gathering one ring for like a split second. Mm-hmm. She knows nothing.
Well,
what information was she going to give him?
She wouldn't have known it was a ring.
Yeah, I mean,
because he's holding it in his hand like this, and then sticks it in a bag.
We're getting nitpicky, but like, what would she have known? It's just like, I saw 3 orcs. Yeah, they were taking some jewelry.
Yeah,
and I will say this is now the second time that they have like completely changed the story of Helm's Deep. Peter Jackson changed it in Lord of the Rings, and now, I mean, the whole thing with oh crap, now I can't think of his name. The cousin.
We'll just reference him as the cousin.
Freyleaf,
yeah.
Okay.
whenever whenever Freyleaf goes and comes back and takes back Rohan, it happens at Edoras. It doesn't happen down at Helm's Deep.
Well, they charged down the infamous hill.
Yeah,
that was like
to save the day.
They did like the same angle and everything. I was like, come on.
They show him up there on a horse, with like the sun rising in the background.
Yeah. It actually. So what sucks when they do stuff like that is it actually takes away from the magic of like Lord of the Rings. And what I mean by that is like when you make this.
Who cares? Nobody's gonna watch the movie.
That's true.
Like, it's not gonna hurt nobody.
No, but it's one of those things though. Like if you do think about it, when you get lazy like that and you essentially like recreate, what you do is you take away the nostalgia from like those critical movie moments. Because then it gets blurred. So if you see both, you end up having like this mixed like memory of that event. and that's kind of what it does there when they do lazy things like that in movies.
When they pretty much take Theoden telling Eowyn she can't go, and pretty much just use the exact same scene almost verbatim for Helm and Hera.
It was. It so much was like it was like verbatim. It's like you're like I've seen this before. That's how you felt. Like I'd say with part of the movie, you're literally I've seen
There was
this.
a lot of the movie that was heavily influenced by the films.
Yeah.
I think the movie, what was it, 2 hours and like 12 minutes?
Yeah, it could have been an hour and a half.
Yeah,
Or
I
not.
thought it was way drawn out, longer than it needed to be. There was so much, when they were just sitting in Helm's Deep, kind of waiting out the siege in the winter, it's like there's so much that could have just been cut.
Yeah.
Well, and they really didn't get. There was no like big siege either. Like in the book, like that was a whole like added thing just to put.
Well, they're like, our supplies
the long
are-
winter is what killed off pretty much everybody.
Right, and they didn't even show that.
Yeah,
And they're like, our supplies here are low.
that old.
And then that was it. There was no reference to like, what are we going to do to replace these supplies? Or how are we going to ration? There was nothing.
because that's how Hemma's supposed to die. Is him and he takes a crew out to like gather more supplies, and they get lost in the snow and never come back. He doesn't get his throat slit there on the.
That was kind of cool, though.
Yeah, I mean,
It was better than dying in the cold. I'll give him that. That was
no,
a good choice, but yeah.
it
He
makes it
shouldn't
better
have rode that
cinematic.
old horse.
Yeah.
That was stupid. They literally said in the movie,
Dude, it was so set up.
It was so sad because it's like
Take
oh,
my horse.
Take my horse. That one's too slow. Oh, I trust this old girl. And then
It's like, what's going to happen?
what's going to happen? And then it's like, oh, horse can't run anymore. He gets captured. He dies. It's like one of those things where it bothers me actually when like there's pure just stupidity in war, where you're like, I got this. When everyone's like, nope, you don't. It's like, nope, I got this. And you're like, okay, now you're dead. Stupid. That stuff irritates me.
Yep.
No, but that is one of the things that bothers me is like anytime we have like those like war scenes and people like literally talk about you shouldn't do this and then just do it anyway, and then it ends in the demise of a war. It creates some fatal flaw in strategy. I also, speaking of which, I hated the fact that I like Hammerhand, but the fact that he was opening the dang gates with
The
his
gate
own
that's
bare
frozen.
hands.
The
Yeah.
steel mechanics couldn't even open the...
Yeah, steel mechanics to open, but he could open with his hands, and I'm like, this does not seem like a heavy and strong fortress.
So why could they not go back in through the tunnels that they came out? They had to run around the mountain to go up to the causeway.
Well, so here's a big old plot hole. They show that the big troll, whatever, like threw a rock and like collapsed rock on top and like covered the hole.
Oh, that's right.
But then whenever they go to leave,
I didn't really notice that was supposed to be the hole.
whenever they go to leave the Hornburg, they just walk right out the hole.
That is hilarious.
So
This is stuff I'm like, how do you not like? You're putting millions of dollars into something, and do you think people aren't gonna like notice? And that's where just it seemed. I know a lot of work went into the film, but I'm like, it just seemed lazy at times. Like this seemed like it was a. I don't even know what they were trying to accomplish here.
you know they played so much into this, the wraith of Helm. And at no point in the actual story does it refer to anything like that. You know, he goes out in the night and kind of like takes these encampments by surprise, and then their story and lore comes back as, oh, he had no weapons and he couldn't be hurt. Like it was just the story and the lore of like this guy who was like killing him. Well, they took that in this movie and it's like, oh, this dude's basically a wraith. He defeated a troll with his bare hands, and he opened the gates with his bare hands. And
I do always like when they have like people like pick up these massive boulders that no one could actually pick up in reality, but it's like bigger than the human body, and you're like just picking up this boulder. I'm like, oh, man, didn't know you could pick up 1,000 pounds straight and then knock out a troll's head. I did not mind though. In reality, I did not mind the fact that they tried making Helm Hammerhand seem like that. Call it Wraith character, because I don't think that they said like he is. I think what they did try to allude to was the lore around him. I do think that they tried to do that.
yes, but then they were making him do like
That is.
unhumanly things.
I mean, that is true. He was.
I mean, we could look at it as this movie was somebody telling the story. And actually, I actually think if they would have taken this movie and centered it around Helm more than his daughter, it could have been more interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been sticking a lot more with like the actual.
It would have,
storyline.
but like they could have spent a lot more time with him going out and murdering people in the snow. And
If you made it against him and Wolf, where like literally it is like more of like a combative, like strategical type movie, I could see that being pretty
Well,
cool.
the problem is like the actual story is a good story. Like they pretty much could have done the exact same movie and just removed Hera and had like a pretty decent story. Like
Sexist.
it comes across as wrong, but like they just completely inputted this new character for no reason, and it's what threw a lot of the stuff off.
Well, I mean, even like the fact that first off, I didn't like that like old keeper lady who like had the weird shrill voice, that seemed like she was like a zombie, and like that whole the bride outfit.
They
thing.
allude to so many things, but then never like touch back on it or.
Well, that but
come
the
back around to
bride
them.
thing was almost like stupid because like then she rides out to war in a bride outfit, which I don't know what she's trying to accomplish. And she's like, "You think I'll marry you now?" And I'm like, is this really like how this war is going down now? Is
She says, "No, I'm gonna marry death."
yeah, and then she's like, no, it's like
so stupid.
no, it really was, but it's one of those things like her strategy and the war strategy was I'm going to ride out as a bride.
You know,
She was using it as
this
a
movie was
distraction.
really.
But still, I was like, I don't know. She's like, his eyes would be on me, and I'm like,
how dramatic.
well, not only that, I'm like, what are the odds that this they happen to find this, wedding dress, and then it fit. I'm just gonna say it fits her that she's gonna ride out into war in it to face Wolf. On this,
Well, they could have tailored it over that time.
that's fair. They had plenty of time as they were watching them build this siege tower. Which, by the way, when it like literally like went straight up and dropped, and clearly the thing would have just snapped. I mean,
It also wasn't a tower; it was a ramp.
well, I feel like it went up
It went
and then
up,
dropped.
but then when it dropped, it was just literally just a ramp.
A ramp, yeah. Which I'm guessing they were like, well, how do we make this seem like they could build it from a distance and then still siege? And I'm like, well, you just couldn't because they would have lit the thing on fire. And the fact that they, even after the tower like hit or the ramp hit, and it still took them, an hour to shoot fire arrows at it
At
or
this
put
wooden
fire
structure.
at this wooden structure because she's out there in the wedding dress talking to Wolf. I'm like, or they couldn't siege it at all. You get through the winter if you just catch the thing on fire.
It's true.
Better war strategy.
She is the Jon Snow storyline, where she's like this royal heir.
Leads up to everything.
She leads them to victory, and then
At the end, she's
She's
just
just
like,
like, "No,
I'm
I'm
going
gonna-"
out into the wild.
Yeah, that was the funny part. Is at the end, it's like, okay, I'm done now. See y'all later.
She's basically like, I'm going beyond the wall.
Well, I think they knew that they really couldn't break story because they created this
they
character.
can't break the second kingship.
Yeah, they couldn't do anything because in reality, like, she isn't a character.
But that's where you have issues when you create characters like that, or take a daughter and turn it into this princess hero.
I mean, if they were really just trying to attract the anime fans, it's probably a primary reason they did it. Get some asses in seats.
And it didn't work.
And it didn't work.
didn't work. Yeah.
I mean, we can be as nice as we want. At the end of the day, I just don't think it was that great of a movie.
No.
And kind of what you were talking about, the more content you put out that underwhelms, I don't see how that grows the Tolkien fandom.
I'm just scared though, if, like, everyone stops investing in trying to create content because then.
But look what's happening with the IP with Star Wars.
Yep.
That's what that's actually a very
they're
good point.
they're snuffing out their fandom.
They're even getting to me at this point, and I didn't think that was ever going to happen.
And
You know,
reality,
the
books
Tolkien's
have held up
books
so
in and
long.
of itself have lasted the test of time. They're great books, and anybody that can sit down and enjoys reading, they're great stories. So, like, that'll prevail. I would enjoy good, film media that's Tolkien based, but
I think a lot hinges on the hunt for Gollum. Sadly,
Which
I don't.
again is
Again,
another
it's
one
I
like-
don't
that-
want it to hinge on.
If like I
but
said,
it's like, who's asking for that one?
I-
We've talked about this enough too, but it's like, I just feel like they really missed the
Surface is
mark.
asking for that.
But that's the problem.
Well,
it's like,
here's a good question too. Is like, if we were to ask, and I know we talked a little bit about the first age, but like if we were to ask for content, what's something we actually would want them to make?
So sadly, it would be first age because there's not enough more. There's not a better story to tell in the third age, and Rings of Power is in second age. The only thing is if they get the rights to the first age, and because that is where the most content is, that is like badass, that would pull people in. It does have to be faster paced than Lord of the Rings. I generally think for this generation,
I think
it has to
we'd
be
run.
faster
I think
paced.
we'd run into the same issue we're having with Rings of Power.
We would.
Right now.
I mean,
is
it-
that
to-
they would have to transition the medium into something that we wouldn't
right.
enjoy quite as much.
Like I would want like the Silmarillion
right.
Yeah.
from like start to end. That'd be too much content. That'd be so long. That
But yet
would-
nobody would watch
but
it.
like
either.
just the creation story and how all that started, like to flesh that out properly, like Tolkien does in his writings, you would lose people because it's slow.
right.
And if you would rush it to appease younger fan base or younger viewers, you're just gonna kill the show from the ones that are already actually Tolkien fans. So
So at this point, we actually have to ask: is like, should they be
Probably
making more
not.
Lord of the Rings content?
That's where I was saying earlier. Is I'm done. Like that's kind of
Like as a fan, like as somebody that enjoys it, is like I obviously want to see more. But like you just said, like Star Wars is doing that too right now, and it's kind of turning.
That was
off
actually a
the
great
fan.
all the
reference.
major IPs.
That was actually amazing when you said that. I was like, it kind of clicked. It's like
It's
you
like,
know what? They are
yep.
doing that. However,
because the writing gets lazy.
I
And all these big the more that I don't want to. The more like these like I guess TV show writers or movie writers just get like lazy with the work. Like you're taking away like the stuff is popular because Tolkien stuff's just gold on its own. Like they could just take the stuff verbatim and it'd be good stuff.
I think then maybe this is what sucks is we obviously haven't had like just say every 10 years they're doing films now with Lord of the Rings, just like throughout some brief like synopsis of timelines. You had Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, they're going to do Hunt for Gollum, and I'm going to talk straight live action. I think doing The Hobbit was good to do, even though in my opinion it wasn't nearly as good as Lord of the Rings.
I think
And
poorly executed is all I think.
Yeah, not as bad as like War of Rohirrim or anything like that. Like they're watchable, but it was definitely disappointing. I think The Hunt for Gollum is the wrong move to go. I mean, obviously they can't just go and someone would have to get like first age content. I think I'd like to see more Lord of the Rings content if they are selective and do it like they did Lord of the Rings in the sense of where it seemed like a passion project. Right now, their works seem like money grabs and just studio productions. They seem like studio productions.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. It seems like these are studio productions at this point of what can we do to make money, not what can we make that's actually like worthy of what we're worthy for the fans. And to be honest with you, studios don't really care. They care about making the money.
Right. Which they're failing at.
Rings of
Yeah.
Power never would have happened if Game of Thrones wasn't a success.
Correct.
So like Amazon obviously saw that and like we need to do our own. We get Rings of Power. I enjoy it, but it's lacking.
It is
It
lacking.
is lacking.
They're doing a lot of things right, but they're also doing a lot of things
But
wrong.
what I will say about that, and I can't remember the name who is actually like really heading it, they do generally care though. I'll say this. They do generally care about the storyline and trying to make this like worthy of the fans. It's just they're trying a lot of things that the fans aren't taking to. I do think that they do try and take feedback. Like I think season 1 came out. They did try and make some corrections season 2, and that's why it was better.
Season 2 was
and I do
definitely
think
better.
hopefully it gets better as time goes on. But I do think that they are generally trying with Rings of Power to appease the fans and make good show. It's just, I think you might be right, is Lord of the Rings fans just like us, we are hypercritical because it is such a well-known story, and you are comparing them to Peter Jackson's works for Lord of the Rings trilogy,
Of course.
which it didn't just set the bar for Lord of the Rings. I mean, that kind of set the bar for a lot of movies.
It really did.
I mean, in general, in regards to cinematic interpretations and presentations, not that everyone loves the story of Lord of the Rings or even likes those movies, but the bar that set for movie making was something that really isn't matched often in
It's
today's
still not
works.
matched,
Yeah.
even with our modern technology. Like a lot of movies can't even compare to what was done back then.
Yeah. So where's the Hunt for Gollum going to like bring in more?
I can't.
And-
I mean, like until we start seeing kind of like a synopsis of what they're planning on doing, like actually story wise, because like I think we discussed it before. Like it can't just literally be about the hunt for Gollum. Like they've got to take something.
They need to
and,
do
like,
stuff kind of like The Hobbit when they did like the side story of Gandalf, and the
And
Necromancer.
Dumbledore.
And, yeah, and that stuff was good. I think they will have to go dark like that again with Gandalf. Like they're gonna have to go darker, things like that.
I'm afraid they're gonna take too many liberties in creating little like side stories off of like the actual hunt for Gollum, and it's again to me kind of like this kind of did. It takes away from being of actual like Lord of the Rings Tolkien content.
And I actually think like as much content as Tolkien wrote, I think that's part of the problem is that a lot of that content is very vague. Like it's in appendices, it's in letters, everything else. So when you're trying to create a massive story based on that stuff, like you have to take liberties because
That's why they shouldn't.
possibly why they shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I do enjoy watching the show, The Rings of Power, though it's lacking. But it's like, I think I do lean more towards like, maybe stop.
I mean, I definitely want them to finish it. Like I want to see them.
Oh,
I want
I
to
think
see
they
it.
I want to see them finish that, but
They
like,
have to, but
maybe
I also want
it's
them
not
to.
necessary though to go out making any more anime shows or, dare I say, even The Hunt for Gollum.
I mean, after how badly this has done, it might kind of disturb them from finishing Hunt for Gollum.
I think Hunt for Gollum is already in like I think it's already in like pre-production.
They're going to be banking that if they can use some of the original cast, that's going to draw.
And I think honestly it'll work.
People
I mean,
seats.
that will be probably a successful theatrical release. I do think that will be successful because it'll be the nostalgia. They have Viggo Mortensen, Ian McKellen, Andy Serkis. I do think it'll be successful.
I think they'll make money,
But
but if the movie comes out and it's not that great, it's not going to be a box office success. So like, cast can only get you so much. So like after the first week or two, if it's like it's getting some people, but it's not like breaking records and stories getting out there like the movie's actually kind of lacking.
Right.
It's never going to surpass any major. You know what I mean?
I think you actually said that watch them try to drag it out into 3 films. I actually think they just announced. I think Ian McKellen let it slip, and I fact check this. I don't want to be a headline reader, but I believe it is now 2 films.
Oh my God.
So
At,
I'm
at
just
that
trying to
point,
think
I
what-
want to know what they're like planning on for the story.
I actually think they can try and create a storyline, but it will not be similar to the Rings because the story cannot be as good as Lord of the Rings in the
Of
Third
course
Age.
not, no.
But
I don't know how you can draw the Hunt for Gollum out into an entire movie just in itself.
If you take away the Hunt for Gollum, which they should change the movie title, and have like the developments of Sauron and what's going on at that time, and
But especially now with Christopher Lee gone, you can't bring somebody else into play.
Oh, definitely
Sauron.
no,
not.
you can't. That
You know,
is
like-
tricky.
I think they waited way too long, and I mean, because Sauron would be a pretty big part of it, you know. And with him being gone, like you can't replace that character.
I think it. I mean, we've talked about this before, but like for me, like with the cast being as old as they are, and I know we got the technology and everything, but I'm like, I think it's an interesting idea to try to do a prequel to the Lord of the Rings. This
20 plus
far,
years
yeah,
later.
20 plus years later. It's like, is that something anybody
Plus,
really wants?
even in The Hobbit, Orlando Bloom, and they use like the age whatever then, and he still looked older than he did.
The problem with Orlando Bloom's is his face is wider. It's more mature. Like
Yeah.
it's things
Yeah.
that you can't change. I agree with that.
Because he's not 22
Yeah.
or 3 or
I
whatever.
And
wonder,
he bulked
though-
up a bit. So
I wonder if first. I do still stand by. I think the age and technology's gotten better, and Viggo Mortensen was already older in that, so they might be able to. His face might not have changed, at least structure-wise, like Orlando Bloom's did.
Right.
But I
don't
still
know.
am curious to see how it goes. I don't think I can live up to it, and I think it's just a studio production because it's like, what rights do we own? They own Third Age content. There is no other story in Third Age to really make.
Not really.
So they're like, well, we can do this. So I think they're desperate to make that content. I think, though, it'll be way more successful than, War of the Rohirrim. Because I do, we'll go see that in theaters. Everyone's going to go see it in theaters. But I don't think it's going to be something that people walk away from and say, this is a great movie.
I disagree. I do not think people will go to see it in theaters.
No, I mean, I think people go to see it in theaters at first. Like I said,
so there
people
there's a
go
large
out for the
amount-
cast.
I don't think they'll be going out in droves.
Not
mean,
like
people
not
are
like
going to
the
movie
trilogy
theaters.
I don't think it's gonna be a
numbers.
box office. I don't think it's gonna be a box office hit. I just think that it is gonna be like something that stays in theaters for a little bit. It's somewhat successful because people are gonna go see it, want to see that in theaters. Because live action is something you do want to see in theaters. Anime, there, in my opinion, there's no point in going to see it in theaters. There's no point
I
in
agree
seeing
with that. Yeah.
like anime in theaters. In fact, like cartoons in general, I don't know what it is, but there's less of a need to go see that in theaters. I mean, for kids, seeing Disney movies, things like that, sure. Like, that is like a memory-making thing. But there are some live-action films that are just made to be seen on a big screen, and anything Lord of the Rings related with the sceneries like that is one of them. With the sets,
I can
and
agree
scenes
with
like
that. Like, I mean, I'm definitely going to be more inclined to watch The Hunt for Gollum in theaters.
Yeah, like War Rohirrim, I'm like, why am I watching?
Yeah.
You're not getting an extra experience, in my opinion, with that, with a like an anime, seeing that in theaters than you are at home watching it streaming.
Yeah, I agree.
Because you're not immersed in it anyway. Live action, you're immersed where you're like, you feel like you're there. Anime, you can never feel like you're there because it's not what we see on a.
I mean, I know it's like a month later since it came out that we now finally watched it, but like I'm glad we didn't go waste an evening seeing it in theaters.
Yeah, I mean, I get that.
That being said, as much as I didn't really care for the movie, we did have fun joking around and
fun.
Always.
watching the movie.
So here's the big takeaway, though. No matter what the content did, get us all together like does other people, gets fans together, watch something, and you do enjoy the nostalgia of Lord of the Rings, and you still can enjoy the time together and even talking about it, good or bad, it's still a net good in regards to the fact that it does bring people together and have similar talking points to it.
Sure.
It does. It is good.
It was good to get together and watch something, but I've never been that annoyed / pissed watching Lord of the Rings.
But I get
Not
great,
even with Rings of Power?
Not even with Rings.
But I get great enjoyment watching you get very annoyed and pissed. So that's why I probably enjoyed it.
I just like really did lose interest, somewhere midway through the film where I'm like, I'm pretty bored.
Yeah,
I
did.
was bored.
I found it boring, yeah.
It is one of those things where like, what's going on the phone these days? It's one of those things where you're like trying. You want to bring up your phone. You're like trying to pay attention to the movie, but you're like, my phone's more entertaining than the movie, and that's when a movie is not captivating.
Yeah, I agree.
So, but maybe we should just give like a full out number rating from 1 to 10. So I'll start with you, Derek.
Either a 5 or a 5 to 6.
That's way more generous. I was actually gonna say 4 out of 10.
I mean, it's Lord of the Rings content, so I watched it, and okay, then maybe definitely not 6. I'll give it a 5. Just bland, mediocre.
Because Lord of the Rings is a 10 out of 10. Now I feel like I've dropped mine to a 3.
Wow. So yeah, I thought you liked it way more than I did.
I thought I did too. But like for me, I was like, if I'm actually rating like movie scale, it's different. Like
I feel like 3 is like horrible.
it when you're comparing to other movies, like it's literally like maybe we can. Go
I mean, compared to the Peter Jackson films,
yeah.
like a 1.
I mean, like, for me, I think anything under a 5 is, like, unwatchable. So, like, I was going to give this a 5.
A 1 or 2 is unwatchable. A 3 is like, you watch it, it's not really
A
good.
3 is pretty unwatchable.
I was
5 is like anything below 5 is kind of just like don't waste your time.
Maybe I can say like it's a 3 for a Lord of the Rings movie, but maybe a 5 is for just like an average movie.
I'm going to stick with my 4.
I can't go any higher than a 2.
Okay.
No matter what scale you put it
I
on.
just feel like this is just a hate review, but it's just like I wouldn't even recommend anybody go watch this movie.
No.
Not unless you're watching it for free and you got like 2 hours to kill, maybe.
Right,
Even
but like
so, there's better things you can watch.
Like, I
than
mean,
that.
we were discussing before we hopped on here is that like might not watch it again.
and I hate to be like that.
Yeah.
Being like such Tolkien fans, it's just like I just was highly disappointed.
Yeah, 2
Because
hours of boring.
I was excited to go when we knew it was coming out. We were like, oh yeah, we're gonna go see it in theaters together. It just worked out with our schedules that we never got a chance to. But I was excited to go see it. And then when it came out, there was a lot of mixed reviews. But I was seeing people saying like the story was good. It was a good movie. It just low budget for marketing, so it didn't perform as well. And then I watched it going into it like kind of optimistic, like I'm gonna try and really enjoy this. I hear the storyline's good, and I don't know. Probably 30 minutes in, I was like, man, this is just not gripping me.
I do like when everyone blames the marketing, and marketing does have a lot to do with like getting the news out there, get people to go to the movies and actually enjoy it, and then you pass the word. What's amazing is like this was not the marketing may be a flaw, but that is not why it's not performing well. Like it is not something you're gonna go see and then tell everyone about how great it is. Like I will say that. That's why I'm like, I enjoyed the time watching it, especially with you guys. But no.
So
for me-
you'll
2
give
hours of my life I
So you'll
won't get
give
back.
us an 8 for The Hang, but a 2 for the movie.
yeah, that pretty much exactly. For me, I'm like, okay, it's nice because like it brings people together. But no, is it something I plan on watching again? No, not at all.
Yeah, probably not.
Where are you rating the heavies?
The heavies are a 10 though.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
I was gonna go 8.5
Oh,
okay, fair.
because when she puts the wedding dress on, they seem to shrink.
That is true. That's true. We'll have to talk to the artist about that one.
Yeah.
But no, I think though overall, not the greatest work put out there, but
But hey, they
Gave-
gave it their best shot, I guess.
yeah,
Good old college try.
The good old
yeah,
college
exactly.
try.
Gave us something to review. So
It did.
with that, we'll send a send off and we'll catch you next time.